Welcome to People. I'm Micah Mateer. Let's get started. A recent study by Harvard University reports the gap between African American and white homeowners in Chicago grown to near historic levels since the real estate crash of the late 1990s, with 38% of African Americans owning homes in Chicago versus 78% of whites as of 2015. A local agency has its sights on closing that gap. The Dearborn Realtist board is the oldest African-American real estate trade association in the country, and they have set a goal of 2 million new homeowners in 5 years. Courtney Jones is president of DRB, and he's here to talk about it. Is this a realistic goal?
It's definitely a realistic goal. Our leadership at the National Association of Real Estate Brokers has really put together a very strong strategic plan where we're lobbying across the country in Washington, D.C. to really come up with some strategies like alternative means of assessing credit, really looking at the cost to do a loan and the risk association of how black families are assessed the ability to pay for a loan. So we're positive. Now,
is this a stupid question, but why is the gap so wide? Is it because of lack of money, lack of credit? Why is the gap so wide?
Well, what the data has shown is there's a couple of intricacies that play into it. We have things like racism and discrimination, because we're seeing now that redlining is still existing in 2018. Banks are still getting sued, for poor practices. We look at restrictive means of how black families are assessed for credit. So that is hurting significantly, that, you go to a different entity and you apply online or something, and because of where you live and all these other factors are playing in a part. So there's a combination of things, but I would definitely hang my hat on racism is still an issue.
In this day and age, we see racism every day, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show. In this day and age, how are we letting people get away with that?
Well, I think it's still the same age-old struggle. We look at this being the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. And the act was
the assassination of Dr. King.
Exactly. So when you think back just 50 years ago, the housing, rate for black families was still at around 38, 39%. So speeding fast forward 50 years, you would say to yourself, well, with this act and more awareness, that would change. But it really hasn't, because a lot of our leadership at the NARAB level would even attest that the act didn't have the enforcement component that, a lot of us believe it should have, which would force behavioral change.
Okay, how do we do it? How do we change it? How do we reach your goal of 5 years to get so many African Americans in homes?
Yes, well, what we're doing, our president, Jeffrey Hicks, has employed a strategy to where we're doing these community day efforts across the country. And Chicago is one of the targeted cities. So at Malcolm X, May 26th,
that's
today, we're having all of the different black neighborhoods throughout the city of Chicago converge on Malcolm X, where we're providing all of the different housing resource tools. We're going to be hosting workshops. So a lot of families will get down payment assistance, free credit reports pulled. So when people show up, the goal is 50 pre-approvals for the day.
So people who are watching today, it is attainable. They can own a home.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Just come out today. 10 a.m. Malcolm X.
All right, it's 10 to 4 today. Community Wealth Building Day, as you said, at Malcolm X College from 10 to 4. Thank you so much, Courtney, for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.